Hello there, this is Iclone 3D with a tutorial on how to create a custom ragdoll and how to attach an avatar to it so that you can take advantage of Iclone 5's new physics engine. Because the tutorial is going to be quite long, I decided to divide it in two parts. The first one is how to create the custom ragdoll, and the second part will be how to attach the avatar to it. Now, if you're a beginner, I would definitely encourage you to watch first my introduction to Iclone 4, which has the hotkeys, which I'll be using throughout this tutorial, on how to manipulate the camera, how to zoom in, how to zoom out, how to pan, how to orbit. All of this will be taught in that tutorial right there. So I definitely suggest you take a look at that. I also will teach you how to move objects, rotate them, and scale them using the hotkeys instead of having to come all the way up here in order to do so. Now I do this because it definitely increases my workflow, and because this is going to be a more of an intermediate to advanced tutorial. So if you're not familiar with the environment for Iclone, definitely watch my introduction. I also suggest that you also watch my how to use the Iclone 3D playground, and also the other tutorial, which is the look at and reach functions for Iclone 5. Once you learn those basics, then come on back to this tutorial, which will show you how to create the ragdoll. So for those that already have watched all those tutorials and are ready to go and been itching to get going, here we go. Alright, I decided to choose a character that has odd proportions to show you that you can truly customize the ragdoll any way you want to. So for this task, I chose Gorf. Gorf over here has very big hands and feet and very thin limbs. So this makes it like perfect to show that actually, you can create a ragdoll of any proportion. It doesn't matter. What's important here is where you put those pivot points for the ragdoll and how much weight you give each of those parts in order for the physics engine to work properly. So let's get started. Now I'm going to press Ctrl D to show you the ragdoll that I already built. I'm going to turn Gorf off here so that it doesn't get in the way. There you go. So this is the ragdoll that we're going to build. Now I'm not going to build the full body. I'm just going to show you how to build the legs, and from there you'll be able to figure out how to do the arms as well and so forth. I will also provide you with this ragdoll so that you can study it and you can modify it any way you want to. Now I cannot provide you with Gorf because this character comes with the special pack with the Connect, so that is copy protected and that would be wrong. So I'm just going to provide you with the ragdoll. Alright, so let's move on and I will show you how to build the legs, the pelvis, and the torso, and then show you how when you use the physics it will react this way. That's all I did here is just press the spacebar and let the physics take over. It's quite simple. So let's get going here. Now I'm going to press Ctrl D. Now Ctrl D is to turn on and off dummy objects. So what I did basically is all those objects you saw there, I turn them to dummy objects. How do you do that? Well, the way you do it, let's see, let me show you. Ctrl D. Now I went ahead and for props I froze them for temporarily. I'm going to open it up so now I can actually select one of the pieces. Now see here, set as dummy. Now that's how you create a dummy object. You select the object and click set as dummy, and then afterwards you can go ahead and press Ctrl D to turn them on or off. That's all there is to that. Now I'm going to go ahead and freeze my props here so I don't select them by mistake. This is a great function, also available in Iclone 4 for those that didn't know that. And I'm going to turn Gorf on again. Now notice that he is in the T-pose. I made him stand this way because it's much easier to get the proper length for the limbs. You do not have to do this, but I strongly recommend that. So I press the F3 key to bring up the timeline, and I'm going to show you how to Notice here I clicked again this object related track. Basically, I had gorf selected, so I clicked it once so the menus pop on, and then I clicked it again so the menus will actually stay. Why did I do this? Well, let's see. Let me show you. I'm going to bring in a prop here, just because we're going to need it anyway. And I'm going to go here to my 3D blocks. I'm going to use a cube. I'm going to bring it in here like so. There we go. Now, let me scale it down a little bit. Before we do this, I'm going to shift the pivot point here, which is something we're going to have to do. And then I'm going to go and reset this. And I am going to move it. And I'm going to press turn on snap to grid so that it will snap straight onto this point over here. By the way, if you don't know the hotkeys, watch my introduction to Iclone 4. There I will show you all the hotkeys you will need in order to navigate in Iclone. And the same keys apply to Iclone 5. So definitely I strongly recommend to watch that tutorial, learn the hotkeys, because it will increase your workflow tenfold. Okay? So so here we go. We're going to scale this down like so. And okay, so I was going to show you why this is important. Now let's see. I have gorf selected, which I don't. Now I do. And I'm going to click object related track. Now look what happens when I click on the cube. Gorf tracks disappear because when I clicked on the cube, the object related track is the cube, not gorf. So what I like to do here is, if I want gorf and the cube, I select both, so I have the track for both of them, and then I deselect this. So now it doesn't matter if I select gorf or I select the cube, the tracks remain here. So just remember that this is a very important. If you want someone a particular object's track, click it once, bring it up, and then click it again so that it stays within the timeline. Now, back to the T-pose, the reason why I was doing this. Let's go to motions and open the motion tab here. And you will notice that when you first bring gorf in, he will be in a different position, which is his rest position. So I'm going to go ahead and click here just to show you the position that he originally comes in, which is usually this position right here. Now, in order to get him back to the T-pose, all you got to do is go to the motion layer and just delete this keyframe right here. Just right mouse over the keyframe and select delete. And there you go. He goes back to the T-pose. Same goes for all the avatars. So again, let me also bring in gorf as a second character here, because I want to show you something else here. So notice here that he comes in at the rest position here. However, he has a different track. He has a I'm going to go ahead here and open his track. I'm going to go to characters, gorf all one here, and so I just open his track. I'm going to bring the timeline a little bit higher so you can see, and I'm going to open the motion layer, the motion tab over here. Notice here that in the motion he has an actual motion clip. So for him, all we have to do is select the clip and delete it. Now he goes back to the T-pose. So whether you have the motion clip in there or not, will determine if you need to delete the keyframe here at the motion layer level. So just to let you know, just in case you're wondering, hey, how come this guy doesn't turn back the way it should be? So that's all you got to do. Just delete the motion clip or delete the keyframe at the motion layer. Alright, so let's get rid of this guy because we don't need two gorfs in here. One is more than enough. So now let's go ahead and start shaping this cube so that it becomes kind of similar to the shapes over here in my already built ragdoll. So the cubes are kind of skinny and kind of short. So let's go ahead and scale it. I'm going to go ahead and scale it down and stretch it a little bit like so. That looks about right. We can always scale it a little bit more later on, so that's fine. So I'm going to turn off my ragdoll, pre-built ragdoll, by Control D. Turn them off all the dummy objects. And alright, so these proportions look pretty good. Looks about right. So let's go ahead and reset the transforms for this. And I am going to leave that one there, and I'm going to duplicate it. So I'm going to press Control, drag, and that duplicates my object. Again, all of this is being taught on the Introduction to Iclone 4, so if you haven't watched that one, definitely watch it, alright? Now, I'm going to go ahead and bring my piece of geometry over here. Let's make sure. There we go. Pardon me. Make sure that snap to grid is off. That's why when I was trying to move it, it wasn't moving properly. That's because I had snap to grid. So let's go ahead. I already turned it off, so you can see now I can move it just fine. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up this piece of geometry here to the knee, because we're going to create the calf. Now, how do I know this? How do I know that the pivot point needs to go right there? Well, I'm going to select gorf here. I'm going to right click on him and go to motion menu, edit motion layer. And I'm going to select the knee. See this little cube here? This tells you where the pivoting point is at. So I'm pretty much lined up perfectly to the knee, to where I want the knee to rotate. Perhaps maybe a little bit lower, so just by a smidget. So let's go ahead and take this guy and take him down just a tiny bit. That should be good. Alright, so now we have a calf. Now let's build a thigh. Now we need to know where the thigh pivoting point is, so let's go ahead and bring the motion layer editor. Select the thigh. So the thigh is about right there. Okay, it's pretty high. So I'm gonna go ahead and deselect this, select this guy over here, and control drag so it duplicates, and that looks about right. You can always, it doesn't have to be perfect, but close enough helps, you know. So I'm gonna go ahead and scale it now so that the length goes almost touching but not quite touching. Leave a little space in between. This is going to be good when you create the ragdoll, so that when the simulation starts there are no initial collisions, and that's very important because otherwise you will notice that odd behaviors start to happen to your ragdoll. Now we have the thigh and we have the calf. Now we need the foot. Now the foot is a little bit different than the way we build the other two body parts, because the pivoting point for the foot, it's in a different place. However, let's go ahead and duplicate this guy again by control dragging like so, and we need to find out where the pivoting point for the foot is. So again, I'm going to right click here, motion layer, edit, select the foot. So we are a little bit off here, so we need to bring this part all the way up here. So let's see, try to remember it. Go here, select it, and go upwards about there. That was good. And now I'm going to select the calf, and I'm going to just scale it down so there's a little gap in between the foot and the calf. Alright, that looks good. Now let's work on the foot. Just by using the scale key. Notice I'm never coming up here at all, except for a few times that I will show you why you need to do that. But other than that, you will see me using hotkeys all the time. Major time saver. Alright, so I'm going to bring this cube about halfway through the foot here on the side here, so that I can scale this, because notice that when I scale it, it scales from the center outwards. So that's what we want. Now let's move this forward so we go from heel to toe all the way like that. Okay, and now let's try to cover the width of the foot like so. Alright, now for the pivoting point. Notice that the pivoting point for the foot was way back there where the calf meets the foot. So was right about there. So what we need to do is shift the pivoting point. How do you do this? You select the object, which we already have selected. Now go edit point, edit pivot, and I'm going to drag this about halfway through this cube like so, like that. There you go. That's good. We know we're centered on this side of it because we only moved it on one axis. Now we can go ahead and turn that off. So now we're ready to go. Let's see. Now let's select the foot. Make sure we got this properly done. Again, motion menu, edit motion layer, and now select the foot. And what do you know? There it is. Perfect. That's exactly what we want. So we just built a leg. Now we got to build the other leg, right? And all we have to do that, I'm going to select multi-select, which is control clicking, not dragging, clicking. So that I select all those parts. I'm going to shift them to the side now. And now I'm going to go press control drag to make the second leg. So now we have two legs. So we are getting closer here to our avatar. Now notice here that for some reason I made the legs a little thinner. I guess I went a little too crazy here. So let's go ahead and scale those two like that. And let's see, just to be alright, like that and like that. There we go. That's good. Let's see, are we about the same proportion in X? We are 173.3 over here. Take a look at this, the scale over here. And here is 170.7. So let's make it accurate. And 173.3. Alright, there we go. So now they're all exactly the same size. Alright, very good. And I'm going to control click here and drag it a little bit closer to each other, like so. Alright, so there we go. So now we have the legs. Very good. That's exactly what we want. Now let's go ahead. Okay, we already froze the parts that we don't want, so want to select. So I'm going to select, press Q for selection. Select these guys. I'm going to go ahead and move them a little bit more to the side here. Now, what's next? The next thing is we're going to build a ragdoll part for the pelvis area. Now, notice that the shape is a little bit odd. So what I'm going to do, instead of using a cube, I'm going to go ahead and use a sphere. One thing you can use, which I did for my particular ragdoll, is use one of the physics props that are already made, and I'm going to use the octahedron here. Just double click on it to bring it in. Alright, next I'm going to go ahead and put it about there where the pelvis starts, and I'm going to start scaling it so that it kind of encompasses our gorf character like that. Very good. And we want to scale this like that because we want to encompass not just the belly but also the tail, so it does a proper I'm sorry about that, a proper hit if he falls down. So let's go about there. Let's see, that looks about right. If not, we can always readjust the proportions later on, just to make sure we do have it right. I'm going to bring in the one that I already made. I'm going to turn off gorf so that we can see I got the right proportions. Notice here I made it a little bit smaller like that, so I'm going to go ahead and scale it down a bit and squish it a little bit more, just to save a little bit of time. You guys can go ahead and adjust it any way you want to. There we go, like so. Alright, so we got the pelvis, we got the legs. Now let's get the torso. The torso is quite simple. All we got to do is select one of these body parts here and control drag, and I'm going to bring this over here to the center, and I'm going to go ahead and scale this. Try to center it more or less. Doesn't have to be perfectly accurate. When you do build your your ragdoll, you definitely will want to build it on top of the avatar itself. The reason I'm building it this way is so that you guys can see it's a little less confusing. But when you build it, you definitely want to build the stuff right on top of it so that you got definitely the proper proportions for it. So let me turn that off again, and I'm going to scale it up. like that, and make this wider like so, and make this wider like so. Alright, so that's pretty good. Alright, the next thing is we have to give these guys a little bit of physics. Otherwise, if we press the spacebar right now, nothing will happen. Okay, one thing we gotta do, I forgot, this little guy has physics on it. So, let's turn those physics off. First, we're going to turn this into a rigid body. And second, we're going to tell it to have, as a collision bounding box, it's going to be self-mesh. Because we want some accuracy when he falls down and hits the ground. And then we'll worry about mass and friction and all that later on. Right now, also I'm going to set it to kinematic because I don't want the physics to be running at all for him. So notice that when I press the spacebar now, okay, he falls down, great. And what happens to these guys? Absolutely nothing, which is perfectly normal because they don't have any physics property on them, except for the sphere now, which we just turned on. So let's go ahead and give the rest of the body parts some physics. I'm going to select these guys, and I'm going to say activate physics, and then I am going to go ahead and leave this parts as dynamic. However, look what happens now that they are dynamic. They just fall apart. Why? Because they're not properly linked to each other. And the way you do that is the same way we did it when we created the chain link in our tutorial 1, which was how to play with the playground that I provided on the first tutorial. So if you haven't watched that, then I definitely recommend you watch that. We're going to go how to link in here as well, but we'll go a little faster so that because we still got a long way to go. So let's move on. First thing I want to do here is give this part right here a bounding box for the collision to be capsule. Why capsule? Because it gives it a better encompassing of the shape, and also because the collision boxes end up in a shape that do not touch each other. Look, when I go to wireframe, see? They end up with the tips being rounded, and this is going to be good for the ragdoll. You definitely don't want square edges when you do this, except of course for the feet, and I'll show you why. There are instances when you might want them just a bounding box for a box bounding box. But actually not for the legs. I'm talking about the feet now, so let's leave the capsule here. Alright, so let's select the feet here, and we can leave them as a box, or we can turn them as capsules. You can play and see the difference. But however, when you do capsule, you got to make sure you do the proper orientation, because for the legs, remember we use the Z, and this doesn't quite work. However, look what happens when you use the proper axis, which would be Y. See? Now the capsule is properly set in the direction that it needs to go. Why? Because this is the X, the green arrow is the Y, and the blue is the Z. Again, if you don't know this, watch my introduction to Iclone tutorial. This is all explained there, alright? Alright folks, let's get back to the tutorial. So, we got this, we got that, we got this as well, which has a collision bounding box as self-mesh. And we got this little guy over here, which hasn't been set yet, so I'm going to activate physics for him, and I'm going to go ahead and go use capsule, and I'm going to go ahead and use Z. Alright, now let's select this part right here. Actually, you can't because they're frozen, but because I've named all my parts right here on this ragdoll, it's quite easy to select it, which is something that very important when you're building your ragdoll. It really helps if you name the body parts. so that if you need to track it down because, for example, they're frozen and you can't select them, but you need to just select it even though they're frozen, then you can just go here and, for example, if I go Shift F and I'm looking for torso, look what happens. It automatically selected all the torsos available for me. So you can use the search engine if you name your objects properly. So very useful tool. Definitely recommend you guys do this, naming every model that you create, every piece of geometry with a unique name, so that if you need to find it later on, then it will be a lot easier to find by using the search engine, which is a new feature of Iclone 5, by the way. Again, I believe I already said this in tutorial number 2 on the look at and reach functions, so if you haven't watched that one, please do so. Alright, here we go. Next, let's go back to Pixel Shader here. So, alright, so we gave this guy's physics properties, right? But right now we have just the default values. So let's see what happens when we just let it ride and let the physics do its thing. Wow, look at that. Interesting, huh? It just falls apart. Why? Because they're not properly linked yet. And I'm not talking about the kind of linking you do from one object to another, but there is a function to do a physics link. And to do this, you press the Alt-Shift-R menu. And this will open up your rigid body constraint settings. Very important. This is how we created a chain link, and if you haven't watched that tutorial yet, please do so. It's on the how to use the playground tutorial. Alright, so let's go ahead and start doing the proper linking here. The first thing I want to do is select all these parts and set them to point constraint type. The second thing I want to do is I'm going to start linking the different parts. However, as you notice here, the parts do not have their proper naming. Again, when you build yours, please make sure you do so. You name them properly. It's very important, again, for selecting and rotating and do all this other stuff. So, but for now, I'll just leave them with the default names because we don't have time to do all this renaming stuff. So let's go ahead and now, after I selected, as you remember, I selected them all at once and put point-to-point constraint type. And now we're going to select one at a time and give them a hierarchy by linking them. How you link them? You pick a target, and from the foot we want to go to the calf. From the calf we want to pick a target to be the thigh. From the thigh we want to pick a target to the pelvis. From the pelvis, actually for the torso, we want to pick a target which will be the pelvis, and for the pelvis we're going to pick a target, the torso. Now we're going to select the foot first. I'm going to pick a target which is going to be the other calf. From that calf we're going to go pick a target to the thigh, to the right thigh, and from the right thigh we're going to pick a target to the pelvis. Again, they're not named that, but that's what they are going to be. So what happens now that they're linked? Well, let's take a look. Nothing happens. Why is that? Well, there are a couple of things that we need to check. First is the weight. These guys have absolutely no weight whatsoever. The mass here is just 1. Now let's take a look at these guys over here. What's their mass? For example, I'm going to go ahead now and unfreeze all the props here so I can go ahead and select them here. Now look at this. Each body part I give them a selected mass. So for example, for the pelvis I give it 200 mass. It doesn't have to be 200 exactly. You can put anything you want. It's really up to you what you do, what you put in here. However, uh, uh, it's important that the pelvis, which is the center of gravity, basically of the body, to be the heaviest part of your ragdoll. So I'm going to go ahead and select this guy, and let's give it 150, just to show you that it doesn't really matter the exact weight as long as this is the heaviest weight of the whole body. The next thing we're going to do here is, remember I told you the pivoting point is very important. However, one thing you will want to do here is also give it a slight rotation to these things. Why? Because it will help the simulation run smoother. So let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and rotate these guys like this, just a little bit, just a little bend over there, and then I'm going to select the calves. I'm going to rotate them this way, just a little bit, and I'm going to shift this forward like so. It doesn't have to be a lot, just enough, so that the simulation has a good head start. Now, alright, this looks pretty good right there. Yep. Okay. The next thing you want to do here is, now let's see what happens with the physics. See, he already fell down, and he kind of falls down properly, but not quite, because the legs are just bending and like he's just like flopping down. To give it a more natural feel to it, what you got to do is create constraints, and this is where this menu comes in. Now you will notice here right now it has no constraints whatsoever, so nothing happens when you do this. Also, the different masses and so on are not properly set up. So basically what I did is, for the legs, notice here, they weighed about 25 for each part, and the feet, I made them a little heavier. Notice here they are 35. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and select both feet here and give them 50. It doesn't have to be 50, like I said, it doesn't have to be those exact numbers, as long as the overall proportions of the legs to the pelvis to the feet are enough, then the ragdoll will definitely work. So this guys, I'm going to go ahead and give him 25 for mass, and go ahead and select this guy and this guy over here. Also give him 25, and I'll give this guy 50. Again, it doesn't have to be that, just an overall. Now let's see what the physics do. See how different that went? By applying different body weights, your whole physics simulation will change drastically. So it's important that when you test your dummy, you have all the proper settings first set up. All the mass, elasticity, friction, all of these things are properly set. Now I will, like I said, I will provide you with the gorf ragdoll so you guys can study it, and you also already have the chalk ragdoll that's included in the playground. So study those two, see how I distributed the weight for the for the physics to look about properly, so it falls naturally down. This makes a huge difference on how your simulations are gonna run. So the next thing we got to do is give the proper constraints for rotation. That's also very important. For example, let's take the knee for example, right? I'm going to press rotate and I'm going to go ahead and rotate the knee this way, because that's the way a knee would rotate. Notice that it goes over here. Take a look at over here. It goes in the positive direction when I bend the knee that way. So what we have to do is set the constraints for the knee so that it goes 90 degrees backwards, like I have it over here, and I put minus 1 degree forward. I do this because sometimes if you put 0, the simulation goes a little quirky. it doesn't quite understand it. It gets confused. So if you put -1, then you have a min and a max properly set up. So I'm going to do the same thing over here for this one. I'm going to type 90 and -1. Oh, did not put the minus in there. -1. Very good. Same thing for the other one. I'm going to type 90 -1. Now for the thighs, I put -20, 90 for both of them. So let's do that the same. -20. Oh. And 90. And for you too, -20, 90. Alright, so let's see what happens when I go ahead and let the physics roll. See? See what happened? He fell backwards just like the other one because, remember, before it was falling sideways and now he's falling backwards. Why? Because we created a constraint for the knees and a constraint for the thighs so that the rotation only goes along the x-axis. So again, very important. Now if you want to give the ragdoll a little more flexibility, what you would do here is also give it a little bit of y rotation and a little bit of z rotation. Now not much, but just a little bit, just enough to give you a little bit of randomness to it. Now look what happens when I do this. Alright, spacebar. So it gives it a little bit, see, now instead of falling straight down, because it was able to bend the leg a little 5 degrees in Y that way, it allowed it to fall a little bit more that way. So if you do that for the other leg, then he would fall backwards again, but it might go to the left or it might go to the right. So it gives it a more natural motion, a more random natural motion to it. So basically, this is how you build your ragdoll. You do the same thing for the arms. You give it a constraint, you give it some rotations, and you link them in the exact same way that I did the legs, and you end up with this, basically the full body of a ragdoll. So the next step will be how to attach the reach constraints. Now, or should I say the stabilizers here. Now, remember how I used the what I used in my second tutorial with the look at and the reach tutorial? Basically used the pyramid for it. And let's see, I'm gonna just go ahead and bring one here real quick. Don't worry, when I include this avatar, you will have these as well, so you can save them on their own. But you know, and also if you want, I can go ahead and just include this. This is basically all this is just one of the primitives, or the should I say the 3D blocks that Iclone includes, and I believe it's called pyramid. So it's this guy over here. So all I did was just scale it and reset the pivoting point in the proper place. And again, if you don't know how to do that, then watch the second tutorial on the reach and look at functions for Iclone 5. Alright, so why don't you go ahead and practice, build your own little ragdoll. You can use Chalk, Wen, or any of the other avatars, and if you have Gorf, go ahead, build one for Gorf. And I will post part 2 of the tutorial hopefully tomorrow. Have a good night, and see you at the forums. Take care.